Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin. Teos is still off gallivanting around the world. So I needed help. And when I need help, the first person I think of is James Introcaso. James, thank you for coming on to the show and helping us out this week.
Oh, Shawn, you need more friends if I'm the first person you think of when you call for help.
Well, yeah,
I'm not very useful in many situations.
If it was a medical emergency, I would still call 911. But if it's
good.
role-playing game emergency, that you're the person who I come to.
Well, thank you. You are my first contact on my role-playing game emergency sheet as well. So that is why I'm glad to be here.
That's good.
So it's great. Yeah.
Happy to be there. So you have been on the show more than once, let's say.
I have.
Including the last time, just probably a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, with Rudy Basso, talking about your game. The name just eluded me. I know what it's about.
To be or not to be a villain.
Yes.
So
yep.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. But for those people out there who may be listening for the first time, you have been now in the industry. I would say that you're gaining the status of old hat.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, James, he's been around forever. He's done podcasting and world builder blog, any award winning world builder blog.
Yes, important for today's news. So,
and Don't Split the Podcast Network. You had your Tabletop Babble. You were at the Tome Show before that. Then, for a run of probably 10,000 Wizards published books, you had some sort of involvement. What was the first one? The first hardcover book that you worked on for Wizards?
Was Waterdeep Dragon Heist was the first hardcover that I worked on. It was blast. Loved working on that book. So yep. I enjoyed all of my time working on Wizards books, but that one has a special place because it was the first one that I did.
Yeah. And you co-designed that with James Hake. Is that correct?
Yeah, James Hake. So I've never worked on another Wizards book like this. It was James Hake and me, and every week we would meet with Chris Perkins. Once a week, we met with him over Zoom, and we would be able to ask a bunch of questions. And then, in fact, it might have actually been Skype that we were meeting over.
Oh,
can you imagine? Skype.
I can't imagine.
From the before times.
Yeah.
So yeah, we would meet over Skype, and we would ask him a lot of questions. Usually, it was very Waterdeep related. It was like, hey, so in Waterdeep, there's a Dragon Lord. Does that mean that it affects Dragonborn? Right? Stuff like that. And Chris would very happily answer all those questions, and then we would go right, and yeah. So it was a blast working on that because we really did have the guidance every week, and I think Wizards now puts out products at a clip that they don't necessarily do that. Although I have not worked on a book with Wizards in a long time, and maybe they are doing that again. But by the time I had reached the last book I did with them, it was very much like, here's an email, send us a first draft, we'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Because they were so busy, I assume.
Yeah, I think you hit a sweet spot there because before, that's in the projects I've done or people I've talked to, it was sort of like that. Here's your outline. If you have questions, let us know. But you seem to be right in that spot where they were really interacting closely. Maybe it's because you're such a great person to talk to. They just wanted to get that in.
I don't know that Chris Perkins wanted to spend a half hour every Friday answering questions about the minutia of Waterdeep from me and Joey, but he was very kind to do it. And I think it used to be that Wizards was putting out maybe 2 books a year, right? Mm-hmm. And they put out the core rule books, and the first 3 adventures were written by third party people entirely who Wizards sort of oversaw, right? And you've talked about it on this show a lot. And so yeah, I think what was happening was they were getting into a place where they were starting to pick it up themselves and do the whole process soup to nuts, but they weren't at a place where they were trying to put out 3 books a year, which now seems to be or 4 or however many it may be now that they're trying to put it out, and a play test and supporting content for the release of Stranger Things to have a Vecna pack ready, and all of these other little things that they do. So there's a lot more going on, it feels like, these days at Wizards of the Coast. Yeah. So, but I'm excited to be here today, Shawn, because it is my personal mission, and I'm calling him out right now, to be on this podcast more than Mike Shea.
Oh.
And he was on last episode, and so I've got to be on here to beat him. I'm throwing down right now, and now we're just going to talk about basketball for the next hour and a half. So sit back, everybody. Get ready.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So this is why I love having James on, because we're not even out of the intro yet, and we've already had an interesting discussion about game design, and so that's why I love having you on the show, because we could get into some deep discussions about some of these things, but let's finish your introduction. So you've done all this work, and now you are at MCDM Productions, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, that's right. MCDM Productions is Matt Colville's production company that make Kingdoms of Warfare and Strongholds and Followers, Arcadia Magazine, and we're about to put out a book called Flea Mortals. That's a D&D 5e monster book. So yeah, we've got a lot of stuff that we're working on over there. It's a great job. I really love working there.
Cool. So with that in mind, everyone should now have an intimate knowledge of James Introcaso's not only RPG career, but life in general.
Right.
We will get to our listener corner, where we take questions and comments from our listeners. We're going to start with Grandpa's Advice via Twitter. Grandpa's Advice asks, what tips do you have for making success and failure into a spectrum rather than a binary system? How can we reward that poor roll made on a good idea? Success with a cost, partial success, partial failure, failure with a small gain. What ways are there to make these up as we go? That is a great and difficult question. And we are actually going to talk about this in more detail later when we get to our main topic, which is going to be designing things for 5e or for an existing system versus creating your own custom systems. So we'll just touch on this a little bit here. It's a difficult question because of how D&D has been designed over the years, and for 5e in general. It's not made to be a spectrum. It's made to be pass-fail, because what's the most important part of D&D for most groups? Combat. And combat is meant to work. You either hit or you miss, or if it's a spell, maybe there's an effect even if you fail, but there's not meant to be a spectrum. So when you port that combat system into other aspects of the system, such as role-playing, such as exploration, it continues to be pass-fail. So there's not a good way, system-designed way, to do that spectrum. Would you agree?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think that there are some games you can look at that, like Powered by the Apocalypse games, right, where they have a little bit more of a spectrum. They sort of have a pass, fail, pass with complications thing going on, which is not a binary, it's a trinary.
Right.
And so you can look at trying to do something like that, where it's like, well, if you succeed by 5 or more, maybe you get something extra. If you fail by 5 or more, maybe it's worse. So you could try to implement that in D&D, but what's hard is D&D's skills and ability checks are really, you can make them to do almost anything that you could do in real life, and some things are just binary in a narrative, right? They're not interesting to give a level of success for how well did you cook this meal, right? You either cooked it well or you didn't. And we're going to see that. Did you climb the cliff? Yes or no? That's all we really need to know. We don't need to know, did you scrabble all the way up almost to the top and then slide slowly back down because you just barely failed? Or did you grip to the top and pull your way up? That's all narrative stuff, but it doesn't have any mechanical consequence on the game. So I do think when we think about binaries, you want to look for, if that's what you want, there are lots of systems that will give you sort of a gradation of success. And you can look to that. But what those do is they really will codify more than what are the kinds of things you are rolling for, so that they can help you do that. Instead of saying, here's a very flexible ability that you can use for anything strength related, and what you would do with it, right? And so if you look at Powered by the Apocalypse games, it's like, hey, these are moves that you can do, and these moves are very specific. They're used to investigate or fight or question someone, right? And there might not be necessarily, sometimes there's like a general move, and that gives you how you would work everything else.
Right.
So yeah, That's what I would say, is look at games like that. And also the weird things that D&D does that are gradations of success are like the sleep spell. They're all like hit point based, right?
Right.
Like damage is a gradation of success. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. And oddly, D&D has had like success plus with a critical hit, or failure minus with a critical fumble if you play with any of those rules, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's nothing in between that. There's no sort of succeed, or there is, like you've said, there are ways, but so here's one way to avoid problems. Like, one question is, how do we reward a poor roll made on a good idea? And don't have the roll. If it's a good idea, let the idea succeed without any roll necessary. And that eliminates that particular problem. If you want to create a spectrum, you have to be careful, because you have to remember what 5e is meant to do. If you start messing with the system will be messed up.
Yes, exactly.
You have to ask yourself, what consequences can there be for for success, but this is a complication. So you ask yourself, what does the system use as consequences? Well, it uses hit points. So you can always say,
Right.
you succeed, but you lose hit points. Hit points are the main resource. Exhaustion. When 5e came out and people saw the exhaustion rules, they were like, oh, this is so cool, I'm going to use this all the time. And then they realized, boy, after 2 levels of exhaustion, that's pretty brutal. I can't quite use that. So lost resources and lost opportunities, right? Those sorts of things can come into play, but you have to then remember, what do those resources mean? Do they mean a lot, or do they mean nothing? Because if you take away resources that mean a lot, that's a huge penalty. If you take away resources that mean nothing, oh, you lost a 10 gold piece item as you tried to break the door down, your spyglass broke.
Right.
If they have 10,000 gold pieces to spend, then that lost spyglass doesn't mean anything. So yeah.
I think those are great. And I think the only thing I would add to that is, all the time, and to this day, when I'm running games, it is reflexive sometimes to ask for a check when somebody wants to do something.
Right.
And they'll ask for it, and then they'll roll poorly. And I'll realize, like, oh, this is a thing you should have just been able to do because your idea was really good, or because you're a very strong character and it wouldn't, you could do this in your sleep, whatever it may be. And I will say, hey, you know what? I shouldn't have asked you to roll for that. Yeah. It's fine to acknowledge your mistakes as a GM too, and to say, so if you find yourself in that situation where you're like, I shouldn't have asked for this, then just say that. Be open, be honest with people, and move on.
Yep.
So yeah, but I totally agree that costing people something is a great way to move the story forward. To make succeed at a cost is a great way to do that.
Yep. So thank you for that question. I'm sure we'll come back to it in our main topic. We have Shadowmain.com's Jason C. coming to us via Twitter and saying, individual character arcs in a campaign, like the Cypher system, has these in the core book, but it could be in any role-playing game. If PCs have these character arcs, how do you keep it from separating PCs from the larger party goals? How do you move the spotlight? And so, yeah, another great question. And I feel like this is how I handle it. James, you jump in at any point to say how you handle it. Having a session 0 where you talk about how important you want character arcs to be is important. Because you, as a DM or as a player, may really want a huge, important character arc to take place during the adventure. Other people might not care. Other people might just want to walk up to things with their sword and hit it really hard. That's their character arc. And that's okay. So recognize that. And if you do want character arcs, in that session 0, be clear, what do you want that arc to look like? What are the questions that need to be answered about the character? What are the goals that the character has they're trying to succeed, and what are the conflicts that are going to stop that? If you can set that up, even in an outline form, then you as the game master are going to be better able to fit it into the campaign arc and the individual adventure arcs of your campaign. If you can do that, the next step becomes easier. But I'll stop there and let James jump in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important during that session 0 for a GM to set expectations too and say, hey, we're all making characters just so everybody knows. It will be really hard to work in character backstories that are like X. Or in general, it's a hard thing for me to do. I would prefer if you have characters who we can sort of discover the backstory along the way, and then it'll be easier to work into the fiction for me because that's my play style, right? Just giving examples here. I don't know that that is necessarily my play style. I'd prefer to have your backstory up front during that session, like Shawn is saying, so that we can say, okay, cool, how does this work? But I think it is good for the GM, session 0 is just as much for you as the GM to say, like, well, this is a game that's going to take place mostly in the Underdark. So having a long lost parent in the Far Realm is going to make it really hard for me to connect these two ideas because I'm not planning on really ever leaving the Underdark. Maybe your parent could be lost in the Underdark. Would that work? Maybe your parent could have been pulled through a portal in the Far Realm that's in the Underdark, right? Like sort of finding those compromises and making it all work together, I think is really important in that session 0. So that then you can weave it into the main story, which I know Shawn is going to talk about as well.
Right. So once you have that set up, then you have to decide, as the question asks, how do you move the spotlight? In my experience, the best way, there are two good ways to do this. The first good way is to make those spotlight transitions very, very quick. Work them in a way that these little individual things, whether they're resolving something or just bringing up something, can be done in a matter of minutes rather than we're going to stop for a half an hour and we're going to go into this. So bring up something that, you meet an NPC. That NPC has some information that's leading you toward that portal that your parent was lost in. Have it done in 2 or 3 minutes, just reminding everyone that this is that arc and we're continuing it. That way the spotlight doesn't shine on someone for too long, leaving everyone else out. The second way to do it is to make it a really long spotlight that everyone understands. Okay, this whole session is going to be about this character's hunt for their parent. Everyone else, we're still going to play. We're still going to play a game of D&D where we get everything, combat and exploration and all that. But the spotlight's going to be here. Everyone else, I want to know your reactions to this. I want to know your reactions to this character's plight. Do you feel sorry for them? Are you exasperated that that's all they think about? Do you get tired of them diverting from the main plot? Make it a story-focused episode from a TV show, like character focus, but everyone else gets their say in how it goes. And that way you're moving that arc forward, but you're making it more of the campaign arc as well as a character arc. And everyone gets their say and gets to react.
Yeah, I love that. And I think doing the, hey, here's a little bit for everybody each session. If you're going to do that, one thing that I like to do is I have a document or note card or something somewhere where I've written what's like the information that is going to help push each character's story forward and just what it is. Like by the end of the session, it'd be great if Shawn found out that the portal was 500 miles away in this direction, which also happens to be the direction of the big bad, right? Or it would be great if Mike finds a sword that has his family crest on it, right? And so writing those things down and then having them to work in kind of at any opportune moment. So it's also a good way to draw in a player, right? If you're playing a session and it's like, oh, I see that Shawn has been sort of sitting back and like I want to kind of draw him into the action. Well, Shawn, while everybody is at the tavern conversing with this patron, you see a hooded figure sort of gives you a motion forward, and then you can have that quick 3-minute scene, which I think is a great way to do it, so that you have those little bits of information ready to go, and you can switch the spotlight that way. I also do love a character focused session, and just making it clear to everybody that like everybody's going to get one of these, right?
Exactly.
I think is a really fun thing, because the first time it happens, they might be like, well, are you now the star of the campaign?
Right.
It's like, no. Next week, it might be Sally's. And next week after that, it's going to be Bob, right? And we just keep going through things like that. It's a great way to do it. And, the more that those things can be integrated, not just with the main story, but with each other's story is great. I played a 4E campaign where I had a dragonborn, two dragonborns, each of whom had evil family members, right? And one had an evil father, and the other one had an evil grandfather, or an evil uncle. And so I made them the same dragonborn. That like it was like, hey, guess what? This villain is the same villain for both of you, and they loved that, right? And we talked about it before we integrated the story to make sure everybody was cool with it. Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that. So if you can integrate those stories into each other, then the other players will care more about each other's stories.
Right. So that uncle is now also a lieutenant of the bad guy who sent the other parent through the portal, and then you can start. But in order to do that, you need to, from the very start, make sure you understand what everyone wants, what everyone's comfortable with in that in their own character arcs. Then you can start to do this behind the scenes weaving of all of these stories together. So, excellent point.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, I think you have here in the notes, if you can weave individual character arcs into the main campaign, it's a way to kill several wyverns with one stone. Do you say wyvern or wyvern? What's your?
I say wyvern, but
wyvern. It sounds more like official.
It does.
It does. More classy. A wyvern wears a tux.
Wyvern is sort of like the accent of the like the lower class folks.
That's right.
They see wyverns fly. Yeah, they see wyverns flying, but the king sends out knights to kill the wyvern.
Correct. And we are nothing if a pair of kings here on this podcast. So.
We are definitely something. Speaking of definitely something, Andrew Basinski via Twitter asked this important question: is it unbearable for a bear to be a bear? And what does Andrew mean by this? Well, he means, how important is it for D&D that when a PC encounters an owlbear, whether a real owlbear, a druid owlbear, or a summoned owlbear, that this owlbear maintains things that are true about owlbears, such as damage level, attack types, etc. And at first, this seems like a sort of a silly question, but it's not, because it's important that an owlbear be an owlbear in your game. The world should be consistent. Then, when the owlbear is not an owlbear, it becomes all the more exciting and mysterious and shocking to the players.
Yes. Yeah, right. And that's a big thing we see in fiction all across novels and television and movies and comic books, where we establish rules about the world. And then when those rules are broken, it is a shock to us, right? We go, oh my gosh, how no one could cross through the dangerous mist, but how did this person do that, right? So it becomes and that's true for owlbears as well. And I think that's one way that it's a druid who has wild shaped into an owlbear, not an owlbear, is that it's acting far more intelligent, right? And maybe casting druid spells depending on the level of the druid and edition you might be playing in. So, it's I 100% agree with what you're saying there.
And then if you attack the owlbear and it disappears, do all owlbears disappear? I don't think so. Oh, maybe this one was summoned, and we know that there is somebody sending, so all of those, it's an important question. And it's even more important question because, as Andrew followed up on, there was an article that we'll talk about in the news about something that happens in the new Baldur's Gate 3 game. But we're going to save that for later. We'll put a pin in that one.
Mastering Dungeons After Dark.
Boy. Yeah. We'll get there. And we'll actually have more questions in our main segment, because a lot of the questions that came in touched on what we're going to talk about there. But this question is a little more specific, and it's from Jonathan Roy via Twitter. What new or newer system or game are you most excited to try, and why? I'm thinking Shadow Dark, Weird Wizard, Tales of the Valiant, etc. I'm going to let you take that first.
Yeah. So I mean, there isn't anything I'm not looking forward to. So let me put that out there. You had Celeste Conowitch on the show a couple weeks ago.
Sure did.
Got really excited for Tales of the Valiant listening to her talk. I Of the things that have been listed here, Weird Wizard is something that really appeals to me. I love Shadow the Demon Lord. I've run it a million times. I'm in a campaign right now. It's the third one I've been in as a player. So I am very excited for Weird Wizard because Shadow the Demon Lord has a particular horror, violent sort of Army of Darkness gross aesthetic that is not for everyone. And I think Weird Wizard is going to be a way for me to introduce people to a lot of those mechanics that I really like from Shadow the Demon Lord to people who might find a high fantasy game more appealing than a violent horror game. And so I am really, really excited for Weird Wizard to come out. That's one that I'm super looking forward to. And I also just got a copy of a game that I really want to try out. It's called Tidebreaker RPG. It's made for action stuff. It's written by a guy named Nick Butler, who it's his first project, big project. But what I saw in previews, I really, really liked. And so it's made for high action, kind of over the top stuff. And I really like that style of gaming. So I'm excited. Those are the things that I am currently itching to check out most. How about you?
Well, as the creator of Planet of the Tarrasque, I can't imagine you liking over the top action. So
I know it's not my calling card at all.
No. So like James, I'm not excited about nothing. I'm excited about everything that's coming out. If I'm going to be completely honest, though, the two games that I'm most excited about are sort of non-traditional sword and sorcery fantasy. They're by Jason Cordova. One is called Public Access, and the other is called Brindlewood Bay. Public Access, they're both powered by the Apocalypse Games.
Nice.
But Public Access is about these people who listened to this public access radio station back in the day. And it goes off the air, and they go back and listen to old tapes, and it's sort of this horror, this slow-burning horror. And the second is Brindlewood Bay, which is Murder, She Wrote meets Cthulhu, where you play elderly ladies who are in this mystery club, and they read mystery novels, but then they go off and they solve these strange murders in their little town of Brindlewood Bay. With all the while, all of these Cthulian horrors are behind it. So it's sort of a cozy Cthulhu game. And I've read them. I've seen some videos, and I was on a podcast and stream with Jason recently, one of many people in this. But when he talked about it, I had already been turned on to it, and then when he started talking about it, I was just like, okay, I need to play these two games.
And that's amazing.
I don't know about you. I'm sure that you're probably like this too. What I'm most excited to play is the stuff that I'm currently working on that you can't talk about, right?
Yes.
It's I'm making this game, and I just want to play it, but it's not quite done yet, so I can't go out and play it. So that's what I want to play so badly.
Yes, it's definitely there's a lot of things that we're working on in MCDM, and we are lucky in that our boss Matt Colville likes to talk about everything as soon as we develop it. Sometimes, and then we throw it away. So we don't have an NDA or anything like that. So we're actually developing an RPG right now, and I'm going to talk probably a little bit about that when we get into the main topic, but that's something I'm really excited to share with people because I'm enjoying playing it with it, which is probably important as somebody who's designing the game. So
this is true. All right. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that. But first, let's get to some news. The ENnie Award nominees were released. If you don't know, the ENnie Awards are done through World, or they started with World. They've become their own thing, and they celebrate role-playing games of all shapes and sizes. The ceremony itself is held on August 4th during Gen Con at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're at Gen Con, you can stop by and watch the awards being given out. They take nominations, and then they have 5 judges, and these judges go through all of the nominees. They choose finalists, and then those finalists are voted on by the public. So that's how these awards work. Yep. Did you have any?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
it's great. I think it's a cool process. That one of the things that I think makes it interesting is the fact that there is this judges thing that happens, and then all the nominees are put up and linked and stuff. So even just being nominated is good for an author or a publisher or an artist or a podcaster, whatever it may be, because it gets people to check out the thing that you are doing. Voting, I don't know any good way to do an industry award because there's always voting involved, and it's hard to, like, for instance, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, which is a beautiful and amazing book, is nominated, and I'm gonna guess most of the people voting have heard of that as opposed to a lot of the other things on the list, right?
Sure.
So it becomes hard to beat some of the more well-known stuff, especially because what are you going to do? Read 1,000 pages to figure out the best product, right? Like it's hard. But so being nominated itself is a huge boost for people, and great. It's a great list for if you're a publisher or you're a fan of RPGs to check out. Like, this is what a bunch of people who read a lot of RPGs think is really good, and so it's very helpful for me to look at something and be like, I should really check out Swords of the Serpentine, right?
Yeah.
And do it. And also, there's already a few Judges Spotlight winners, including one from Ghostfire Gaming that I saw.
It's true.
So Dungeons of Drakkenheim, Ghostfire Gaming. So I just wanted to shout that one out because I don't want Shawn to seem like a shill.
I'm fine shilling things that I believe in, and
excellent.
While it was published by Ghostfire, it was written by the Dungeon Dudes, Monty Martin and Kelly McLaughlin, and they're amazing streamers, podcasters, players, DMs, and creators, and I only worked tangentially on the book, so I can honestly say, congratulations to everybody at Ghostfire who worked on it, and to Kelly and to Monty, because they're amazing folks.
Absolutely. Well, a tangential congratulations from me to you then.
There you go. Other Judge Spotlight winners were One Breath Left from Stout Stoat Press by Ian Howard. Void 1680 AM from Bannerless Games. The author is Ken Lowry. Moonlight on Roseville Beach, a queer game of disco and cosmic horror by R. Rook Studio. Several authors there, some who I've worked with before. Rob Abrazado, Sharang Biswas, Aaron Roberts, and a bunch of great creators. And the final one was Faycraft by Exalted Funeral, the author Will Purvis. So congratulations to those people who were called out by the judges as notable contributions to the RPG industry this year.
Yeah, congratulations. It's a huge list, and these are really awesome products that people should check out. Void 1680 AM is a solo RPG about building a playlist, right? So that you can find some really, really cool stuff just by looking at the Judges Spotlight here. And then there's a zillion awards too that I think I'm really excited about.
Yep. So it's great to see, like James said, it's great to see the publicity being the spotlight being shown on other RPGs, other types of RPGs, small ones, podcasts, digital versions, like blog content. All of that is covered by the ENnie Awards. So you can check out the list in our show notes. There is a link to all of that.
Yes, exactly. Go check it out. There's a lot of really things that are worth your time over there to check out. So including games for kids. If you're looking for RPGs to play for kids, there is stuff. and there's like best free product and stuff like that. So really go check it out.
Yep.
Yeah. I will say they seem to have stumbled in the best podcast category though. There's no mastering dungeons, so I will be boycotting.
Oh.
I'll be boycotting until they recognize the accomplishments of Duke University here on this podcast.
There you go.
In the NAAC, in the
NCAA.
NCAA. Thank you very much. You can see I know a lot about basketball too.
There you go. But speaking of the ENnie Awards, that happens at Gen Con, and Gen Con is just around the corner. Less than a month now, August 3rd through 6th in Indianapolis at the Indiana Convention Center, at Lucas Oil Stadium, and at nearly all of the hotels, ballrooms, and meeting rooms around the convention center. There is content as far as the eye could see. And also, if you are not traveling, if you are not attending places in person, there's Gen Con Online. Registration for the live event has been going on for a while, but registration for the events for Gen Con Online just went live yesterday, as of this recording. So you still probably can get into online events and get into online games if you so choose. You can just go to gencon.com and do that. And for the first time, Ghostfire Gaming will have a small presence. We will have a small booth. I will be there some of the time. I don't quite know my work schedule there yet, but please do stop by the booth and say hi. We will also, through our good friends at the World of Game Design, be offering games in many of our worlds. Grim Hollow, the world of the Ethereal Expanse. There's one more. What am I missing? I don't know if we're running any Aurora stuff there or not, but we will have several games being offered, so you can sign up and play.
That's awesome. You should check that out. By the way, if you can meet Shawn, it was great to meet in person. Get him to sign something. Get him to sign a book, or a T-shirt, or your face.
I will.
So, yeah. In fact, I'll say it now. If you send to me a picture your face signed by Shawn Merwin at Gen Con, I will send you a free PDF of something.
Oh, boy.
Tweet it at me or reach me. If Twitter doesn't exist anymore, we'll find it other way. I'll trust Shawn to tell me.
I hope I don't have to sign anyone's face, because that would be super embarrassing. And then I will have to have you sign my face, and my face could probably fit a lot of signatures, but it might be a little awkward for my family, as they're going to be there as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, people only have tattoo pens at Gen Con, so it'll be a permanent signature. Yeah.
Speaking of awkward things, Baldur's Gate 3 is coming. We talked about this last week, but James had some more information to share with us about Baldur's Gate 3 and what we know about it.
So yeah, there was the panel from Hell last week, which was this big panel that Larian Studios, who's making Baldur's Gate 3, showed off. There were interviews with some WotC staff. Dan Dillon appeared, which was really cool, in one of their videos that they had, and was talking about the game and Baldur's Gate and stuff. And so there's a lot of new features. So that, they've done various alphas and betas of the game that people have played and experienced, and so, but there's a ton of new stuff in there. There are deeper, like, character creation is a much deeper system. You can create a custom character at start, or you can pick one of their pre-made characters who will have like an origin story that runs deeper through. There's 174 hours of cutscenes, and I assume that's not in one playthrough, right? That's like, hey, if you play through with this character, you get a bunch of these cutscenes. You get through, but that's like twice the amount of content in Game of Thrones, right? If you were to try to hunt down and watch every cutscene. So there's a lot of love going into this, and there's a lot of things that have been done that seem like they're not written within the rules of D&D, but they are things that happen often in D&D. So like Warlock players can talk to their patron, which is a thing that, again, the rules of D&D don't necessarily give you a lot of ways to do that. But it is a thing that almost happens in any campaign with a Warlock, right? And one of those things is there's a lot of romance options, which D&D is not a game that I typically play a lot of romance in. There are a lot of role-playing games built for romance, but they've created this sort of system in these stories where you can have different romances with different NPCs and characters who join your party and stuff like that. And there was one, Shawn, that made headlines because you could romance druid.
It's true. We're gonna call this Druid's Gone Wild Shape, and it's you can have sort of a. Speaking of owlbears, you can sort of have romance as Druid wild shape things, and it got a note in Kotaku.com's news site where it talks about that, and this is something that people who've played D&D over the years have kind of awkwardly joked about forever. As soon as Wild Shape became a Druid feature, back in the days of yore, people will be like, yeah, that's funny. Let's not talk about it ever again. And now we get to talk about it again. So if you're into that, more power to you.
Yes. Yeah, and the apparently said scene of romance was live streamed and also got Larian Studios banned from Instagram.
Nice.
So proceed at your own caution. Google at your own caution. But it was big news this week that is also part of the game.
There you go. And we will be looking for that launch, which I think we said August 3rd for PC, and then September 6th on PlayStation 5. So there you go, if my memory serves, which it rarely does. Last but not least, we'll talk about...
go
ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, all things aside, it does seem to be a very deep and well-made game. Putting a pin in the bear.
Yeah.
It seems like it's going to be cool.
Everyone who I've talked to who has played the beta version has raved about the game. So I hope it fills that niche of really good D&D games that we haven't had a contender for in quite some time.
Quite some time, yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. It should be it'll be interesting. Could we have in the same year a good D&D movie and a good D&D video game? That would be truly wild, Shawn.
It would be. It would be something that I would have never predicted to have happen in my lifetime.
No.
So there you go.
It is close to the end of the world. Everybody, get ready.
Get ready for it. Crowdfunding and releases. I want to highlight Dragonlance Shadow of the Black Rose by our friends at Dragonlance Nexus. They have a great Dragonlance podcast and content there, and they've put this adventure source book up. And what's most notable, other than it being by a group of great creators, is that they have a foreword by James Lauder, who wrote Knight of the Black Rose and Spectre of the Black Rose back in the day, as a Dragonlance novel. So they are pulling content from those novels, and they have in this product, it's an adventure. It's got rules that you can use. It hit #1 on the DM's Guild for a few days, which is rare for like an adventure to do, to overcome the evergreen things that are always popular there. And they have sort of a biography of Lord Soth and all the adventures and all the novels that evil villain has been in. And so if you get a chance, check it out. It's $8.99, I believe, but it's got a lot of great content. And you could do worse on the DM's Guild. I will leave it at that.
100%. Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
That's great. I'm excited to see a product like that up there. Dragonlance is awesome.
Yep. And it also acts as a grand finale to the hardcover book, the hardcover adventure, if you want to sort of extend it a bit. So it's for higher level characters dealing, obviously, with Lord Soth. There is an end in sight to the Aetherial Expanse Kickstarter. It ends on Friday night. So at midnight Friday, going into Saturday, you can still back, but we're running out of time. So I hope you have enjoyed our talks about it, not only here, but on the Eldritch Lorecast, as we've highlighted what it's all about. So give it one last chance to check it out. But what I want to talk about is this Flea Mortals. So the Kickstarter ended. You've been working day and night, blood, sweat, and tears, I'm sure, on this. And I think the release date is in sight. Is that true?
Yes. So the release date is in sight. I don't know. It's a good question about how public we're being with things about this because, again, we don't know, but we're targeting the beginning of August for the release of the PDF. And then backers and other folks who got their books should be getting their hardcovers starting probably in September. So yeah, we're talking to the printer right now. The PDF is in accessibility, which means it's been through layout. So we're just writing up a lot of alt text and stuff like that. And then the hope is to get into the hands of folks who backed and pre-ordered soon. It is a big 5e monster book. It's got 339 stat blocks in it, and it is. A lot of it is our take on classic creatures. So instead of adding a bunch of creatures, we've redone a lot of the creatures, and we've added a bunch too. So things like we have our take on dragons and wyverns and goblins and orcs and humans and all kinds of things. And we've given you sort of in the 4E style, when you would turn to, in the 4E monster manual, you would turn to goblins, and there were 8 to 12 different goblin stat blocks. We have done that with a lot of the monster entries, especially for things like humanoids, where it's like, well, you would have, we give you 12 different humans that you can use to drop into your game. We give you a bunch of different orcs, a bunch of different goblins, a bunch of different frog folk that you can drop in. And so that is to sort of help you flesh out those encounters, keep them interesting. And that was a big thing that we did. I know I think I've talked about this book before on this podcast, so I won't get too much into it, but it's really exciting. And also with that is a separate book of lairs is coming called Where Evil Lives. And so each boss monster in the book, we have given a lair to. It's 22 different lairs with unique magic items and stuff like that. And that will be coming in PDF as well to all of the folks who backed and pre-ordered. So look forward to that. It's a lot of content. We accidentally wrote 2 books when we meant to write 1.
So how long have you been working on this book? When did you sit down and make the outline and say, okay, we're going to be doing this?
That's a great question. So since the end of 2021, really back half of 2021 is when we started this. The first playtest was happening in December of 2021, and we had outlined and stuff before that. But even before that, we were making products because we knew we wanted to have companion creatures in this book. So we released the Beast Heart, which is a custom class and has companion rules and stuff in it before that. So really, you could say we've been working on it since 2020 if you wanted to. that tracks. It's been a process, I am sure. So yes.
God bless.
Know a little thing about making 5e monster books.
a little too much now, but it is. So you're gonna when does Flea Mortals 2 start? Yes, and then the weeping begins.
No, it's a great question. We've really I've had a blast, and I certainly learned a ton about making monsters on this book. We'll probably take a lot of what we learned in Flea Mortals, and we will apply it to creating monsters for the MCDM RPG. So that'll be the next big monster book we make, is the Flea Mortals version of whatever we're going to call our RPG.
Awesome. So. Well, that is a perfect transition into our main topic this week. So let's get to that.